and welcome back to Sisterly. We are so excited to have you here for another episode. On today's episode, we're actually going to be talking about our experiences with mental health and mental illness. For those of you who don't know, on October 10th, it is actually World Mental Health Day. So we thought it was kind of a good time to speak on this. Make sure that you do something for you on October 10th in honor of your own mental health. But before we get into today's topics, we just wanted to kind of go back briefly to our topic last week, speaking on our early job experiences. Thank you so much to everyone who listened and gave us feedback. It means the world. But we did have a couple of additions to work experiences that we just wanted to cover. My friend Rachel, who I talked about, that I worked with at the country club. If you didn't hear that story, make sure to go back and listen because the whole story is pretty funny. But she wrote in with a couple of experiences that I completely forgot about that I think should be shared. One of which was that I forgot that when we worked in the kitchen, the chef called us little girls. Like that's how he referred to us.
That's what you want to hear.
He would say like little girls to get our attention, which I truly blacked out, I think, because
that feels professional.
Yeah, it was rough. I did have another work experience where someone called me Little Liv. It was a man, which made me irritated. Another one that she brought up was that the high school boys that we worked with would throw the order pads that you would take like people's orders on at her and would scream nerd at her, and they made a Vine of it, of them throwing things at her screaming nerd, which was wild.
The levels of harassment in this place.
Absolute insanity. I also forgot that one of the Vines they made was them playing like real life Fruit Ninja.
Oh my god, just slicing the fruit with the knives?
Yeah.
Yeah, no wonder they freaking got fired. What are they doing?
She also reminded me, though, that they actually got hired back the next summer. There's no justice. When you think there's justice, it isn't real.
Okay, so our delayed justice is a farce.
Yeah.
No justice.
No justice. So that was upsetting, but was happy that she updated me with some things that I did forget. She was like, "Don't you remember this?" And I was like, "No, I really think I blacked it out."
Yeah, you're like, the trauma of it all really just faded from memory.
So I also had another friend reach out to me because she saw our poll that we posted on our Instagram at Sisterly Pod, which you should be following if you're not following. And she texted me to talk about an experience she had at work. And she said, "I saw your question about embarrassing stuff at work. I had secondhand embarrassment when my PM, I'm assuming that means project manager, was trying to show me how to use a software via YouTube videos. And his recent search before he showed me the software video was how to be a better kisser. I died on the spot." She said, "We were on video camera too. I just kept staring at the search bar."
That's so uncomfy.
So wild for a million reasons. I hope he didn't notice.
I know. I hope for his sake that he didn't see it.
Because how do you not, though?
How do you not just like fall into a hole in the floor? Like, how do you not just wish to melt away?
I understand the internet is a great resource for all of your embarrassing questions. If you are looking up a video like how to be a better kisser, you do that in incognito mode, okay?
Right. That is what that mode is made for.
Literally the purpose.
Not your work computer.
Don't use your work computer or use your phone, for God's sakes. Like, don't use your work computer.
It's like rookie mistakes, right, left, and center. Like, what are you doing?
Yeah, that's a rough one. So,
also I have to imagine that this man was like a fully grown man. Like, why is a said man like? I mean, you know what? I take it back. I'm not gonna judge him. Maybe he wants to improve his kissing skills, and you know what? Good for him. You can improve them at any age.
Yeah,
but just do it on your phone, probably.
Yeah, do it like a little bit more privately. Yeah, who knows? Maybe he like got feedback that he wasn't a very good kisser, and there there's no time like the present to learn, Like,
This
we're
is true.
learning and growing. So if you want to be a better kisser, I
It's good to
support
take
you.
initiative. I like that. You know what?
100%.
Just don't do it on your work computer.
Yeah, it's better to ask the question, right, than to never work on it.
Right, that's true. What if he just, like, went forward in life, like, continuing to disappoint the people he was kissing? Like, he took
Yeah.
initiative.
No, I completely agree. But yeah, moral of the story, keep it at home, folks, or keep it on incognito mode. So that's all on last week's episode, but thanks again for everyone who listened. And if you didn't, there is no time like the present to head on
Get
back
on it.
and listen to that one and then come back and listen to today's episode.
Feel free to tell us more, embarrassing or hilarious work stories because they don't get old, so
Never,
tell us
yeah.
tell us anytime. All right, with that, let's get into our topic for today. So we wanted to talk a little bit about mental health, and I feel like this is a topic that everyone should relate to because everyone has mental health and is either taking care of it or not, but we all experience it.
Mhm.
And so Olivia and I wanted to talk a little bit about our experiences, what sort of mental health issues we've faced, and um, sort of the challenges we've gone through, and then what things we found the most helpful for us. So I guess I'll sort of kick it off with
Yeah.
um,
And I do want to say quickly, just before we kick it off, that we know that we are by no means mental health
oh yeah,
experts. Um,
clearly not.
I think everyone can get that. You know that we're not. You probably know that already. But just want to say, if you are at all struggling with your mental health, that there are resources for you and professionals that can give you specific advice to your needs. So these are just things that help us, but are by no means a rule book or a
Hmm.
prescription of what other people should do.
Yeah, absolutely. Important disclaimer. We
Yeah.
are not in any shape or form experts. These are just what we have done for ourselves and what's worked or what hasn't for us. And everyone has such unique mental health challenges. So, not universally applicable. But for me personally, I have dealt with anxiety ever since I was a little kid. Um, I definitely had it as a young child, but I really didn't have a name for it for a very long time. I didn't know what anxiety was or what the feelings that I had were. Um, I just remember feeling worried a lot about things and also just having sort of weird fears or things that I would just sort of obsess about or be concerned about. And I remember one time even actually when I was maybe 9 or so, I remember, I was, like, in bed, and I kept feeling like I couldn't breathe, and my dad came in and was like, what's going on? Are you okay?" And I was like, "I can't breathe." And I was like, I was clearly breathing. He was like, "Well, you're breathing." And I was like, I can't breathe." And
That's such a dad thing to
I
say too. He's
know.
like, well, I see it.
It's like
So
the air is coming in and out. But but I think what I in hindsight realize is I think I was having a panic attack just like as a child. I was really just anxious and this was actually not long after my parents had gotten divorced and it was one of our first times visiting my dad in New York and I was just like at night all of a sudden just like I felt like I couldn't breathe and I, like, only later realized what that was. At the time, I was just like, "Oh, I don't know. I guess maybe it's my asthma." Like,
what's not
which
helpful?
also, like, it could be fair because it's a legit also concern,
It's
but
not super helpful when you have panic attacks and also asthma
yeah.
because it's like, what's going on?
They sometimes
Which one
go
is it?
hand in hand. You're like, "Am I having a panic attack or am I having an asthma attack?" Either
Uh-huh.
one unpleasant, but similar feelings sometimes. Um, but I guess what I should really start with is that Olivia and my parents got divorced when we were younger. I was 7. And so shortly after that, our mom had us start going to see a therapist. And so that was our first introduction to sort of mental health care and talking to someone.
Yep, been in therapy since I was 4, folks.
So you could say we're really evolved.
My dad's favorite story about me going to therapy when I was little is that he would come in sometimes to talk with the therapist too, just to like, see how things were going with us, or if there were things that he could work on. And I'm sure at one point there was legitimate feedback, but the one he likes to talk about was that I used to complain to my therapist that he would make me eat all of my food, even when I didn't like it.
Yeah.
That he would like make me eat my protein and my vegetables, and I didn't want to eat it, and he would make me. That's his favorite story about a conversation that he had with my therapist. Just so.
Yeah. Well, when you're 4 years old, it's a concern.
Listen, I was a picky eater, still am, but it was even worse back then. But that's a whole other topic.
Yeah, so Olivia and I have both been in therapy for from an early age,
Yeah,
and
on and off,
on and off. Yeah, yeah, not the whole time. But what's interesting is actually at that time, it's not like we were sort of diagnosed as having any sort of mental health issue. It was more just here's a situation that's difficult that could have an impact on a person's mental health. Like, why don't you come in and talk about your feelings? Which I think is really important to also recognize that you can go to therapy even if you're like, I don't think I'm depressed or I don't think I have anxiety. Like, you can just go
right?
to therapy because you want to work through an issue or
Or like
uh
a preventative measure, like
right, or just be like, I'm about to face a difficult decision or something challenging. Like, why don't I just talk it through with a professional? Like, you don't have to be at your wit's end to go to therapy. In fact, it is highly encouraged, I think, for you to go
yeah.
before you're at your wit's end.
And I think what was so important too about us going to therapy from a young age is that I didn't really ever have a stigma against
Yeah.
therapy. I never saw it as a bad thing. I remembered going when I was a little kid. Our therapist was great. She would always have snacks for
She had
us.
cookies, loved that.
Yep. So we would, it was like at her condo. So we would go in, and I remember Rebecca and I would go in separately, and we would have snacks while the other one went up. Or, as we got older, we would start doing our homework while the other one was in therapy.
Mhm.
Um, it was almost like an after school activity.
Yeah,
Like
it
it
was
didn't
like an
feel
activity.
weird. Yeah,
It
I
was
liked
just
going.
yeah, me too. I was like, "It's cool. I'm gonna chat about my feelings and then, like, eat some chocolate chip cookies." Like, there's what could be bad?
Yeah. So I always viewed it kind of positively.
Yeah, same. It was kinda nice that it was not a weird thing, and it also didn't seem like a thing you had to go to just because there was a serious problem.
Mhm.
Obviously, there were things that we were dealing with, but it wasn't like, "Oh, we're in such a bad state." It's just, "No, we're just going to go talk through things and work through things." Um, and I think we did that for a while, and then for me, my anxiety reached the worst it had ever gotten my freshman year of high school. And at the time, I didn't actually know what it was. Um, it was strange for me because I started feeling all of a sudden a lot of really physical symptoms. So it wasn't like I felt super nervous, but all of a sudden I felt what I used to describe as dizzy. I felt like uneven, like things were kind of shaky. My head would feel really, really heavy. Um, it felt like things were kind of like moving or swaying. Um, yeah, and just like really physical. Um, and I I started going to, I think first my like pediatrician to be
Yeah, we
like,
thought you had vertigo. I
yeah,
remember that was we
exactly.
for the longest time, we kept being like, "Oh, Rebecca's vertigo."
Right. So people were like, checking my ears, doing blood tests, trying to figure out like what is going on with me that I'm feeling so dizzy and off balance. And um yeah, I remember like I used to do ballet and I would go to ballet and I'd be like, I'm so dizzy and confused. I don't really know what's happening. And even just sitting at home, I'd feel it at school. I would feel what I later learned is sort of disassociated. I didn't have the words for it at the time, but I just would feel really removed from things. I felt like I was almost not in my body and just everything felt kind of distant. Um, and I did not know what it was, but it was very startling and it went on for months. And I just remember I started to feel really hopeless that it was never going to go away, that I was never going to feel normal again. And in the meantime, I was getting like labs done on my blood work, my hormones, like what's going on here. I went to see a neurologist, all sorts of things. And I think we did find out that I had sort of I forget what it's called, like the thing when you stand up and your blood pressure drops really
Mhm.
quickly. Like I do have that. Um, but there wasn't anything super conclusive physically that anyone could determine why I was feeling all of those symptoms. Um, and it sort of just went away at a point, like the physical symptoms just sort of slowly started to go away after months, and it wasn't until years later when it started to happen again that I actually figured out that it was anxiety that I was dealing with, and that um later on I would end up getting like full on panic attacks, and I would realize that, oh, back in high school that's what was happening to me.
Yeah, I remember I used to be so confused when I was little, and you would start I wasn't, like, very supportive back then because I was like, "What do you mean you're, like, dizzy?" I was like, "What's going on?" Like, I didn't understand. I was like, "Why?" And it makes sense now remembering when you used to feel this way, like, remembering what events were going on
Right.
that it suddenly came up, and a lot of times it was, like, events that I also wasn't thrilled to go to or didn't wanna be at, and I was like, "Rebecca, do not leave me here alone." But it's like I didn't understand what was going on, you know? I didn't
Right.
know that you were actually panicking about it.
Right.
Um,
And it was funny too cuz like we had been in therapy, but It it really was. I don't know if I was still in therapy at the time or not, but
I don't
it
think
really
so.
I don't think we were, and I just was not a connection in my mind at all that, oh, that this it just felt so physical that I couldn't wrap my head around the fact that it could be, a mental issue, or, that there could be a connection there. I thought I was like, "I have to be sick." I was like, "I'm dying." I have, like, who knows what's going on, but I'm dying.
I remember we, like, thought you got vertigo because we went on a cruise, like,
Right.
it
It was
was
like, "Is it your ears?" Like, no one could figure it out, and it
yeah,
just felt like there was no resolution, and then it just sort of slowly started to go away, and I think what must have happened is it just, like, my the whatever events had been happening slowly became less overwhelming, and I just sort
right.
of moved beyond it. Um,
Well, beginning of high school kinda makes sense,
yeah,
and
it was
maybe
like a
you
big
started right,
transition,
and you started to
and
get the hang of it, maybe you just didn't feel as anxious about it
yeah,
all the time.
exactly. But it was very disruptive, like, to
Mhm.
school and everything, because I just would be so focused on how I felt instead of just, what I was doing. And it just made me feel like a crazy person. I was like, "What is going on?" And I missed school a bunch to go to doctor's appointments or to be like because I just felt so dizzy, which was kind of crazy. But yeah, it wasn't until the summer before my senior year of college that I distinctly remember I woke up one morning in like late May. It was like Memorial Day weekend or something. This the summer before my senior year, and I woke up and I immediately had the exact same feeling that I'd had when I was a freshman in high school. And I felt so panicked immediately because I was like,
Yeah.
my head feels the same way. I was like, I feel dizzy, my head feels heavy, like what is going on? And I kept trying to walk around, and I was like, I feel the exact same way. And I was just so scared that I was gonna now endure months again of these like physical symptoms and never
Mhm.
figure out what was going on.
But I do think you went back eventually when it happened again to see, like, a psychiatrist or a therapist,
Yeah,
like,
yeah,
when it
yeah.
happened the second time, and then you
Yes.
were able to figure it out. And I do
Yeah.
believe you got medication for the panic attacks.
I did. So the second time it happened, it was the summer before senior year, as I said. And to give you a taste of what I was up to that summer, I was working. I was also taking organic chemistry. I was also studying for the MCAT because at this point in my life, I thought I wanted to be a doctor. So I was doing a lot of things
Yeah, spoiler,
at
she's not
one
a doctor.
spoiler, didn't become a doctor. It's better for everyone. But at the time I thought I wanted to, and I was killing myself over trying to study organic chemistry, trying to study for the MCAT. Meanwhile, like not understanding organic chemistry and getting so frustrated by it, also trying to maintain my job. And all of a sudden I start feeling these like awful physical symptoms. I'm dizzy again. I'm feeling out of it. And then I start actually having instances where it feels like my heart is racing. It's like pounding in my chest, and times where I'm like, I don't think I can breathe. And I'm like, am I having an asthma attack? I like take my inhaler, and it's just, I was like, am I going to throw up? Am I going to pass out? What's going on? And I ended up seeing a doctor. And he did like an EKG, like made sure my heart was fine and everything. And he was like, "This sounds like anxiety." He was like, "This sounds like a panic attack." And I was like, "Really?" And
You don't say.
I was like, "Tell me more," because I was like, "Oh, you have a possibly a new solution that someone has not proposed to me as to why I'm feeling this way?" And he was like, "Yeah, this sounds like anxiety." And he asked me what I was up to, and I explained what I'd been up to that summer. And he was like, "Yeah, that'll do it." I was just like, "Oh, okay." And and so yeah, he prescribed me like a medicine for to basically, if he was like, if you're having a panic attack, you could take this medicine and it will sort of halt the panic attack and bring you down. And he was like, if you're really interested, you should also see a psychiatrist. Maybe they could prescribe you something more preventative for your anxiety if you feel like that's something that you want. Um, and so I remember I would like everywhere that whole summer, I would like carry in my purse like the
Mhm.
panic attack pills. It
Yeah, I
made me
remember that.
feel better to know that they were there, and that if I were gonna have one, that I could take one. And I think I only ever took one time, like the whole summer. But just mentally knowing that I had something that might be able to calm me down and prevent that was a huge relief. But it was a very stressful summer, because the even though I had that, the symptoms did not go away immediately. I still suffered with
Mhm.
panic attacks. I still felt dizzy, but I at least felt some relief in knowing, okay, this is actually what it is. I
Yeah, and the
know what it is.
validation.
Yeah, I was like, oh, okay, I'm not crazy. Like, this is other people feel physical symptoms when they have anxiety. This isn't just me coming up with something crazy. Like, my body is actually so stressed that I'm genuinely feeling this way, and my body is reacting this way. And it was actually before I went to this doctor, I was at the movies. I forget if I was with you or where I was, but we were watching Iron Man 3, which came out that summer. And in one of the scenes, Tony Stark has a panic attack, and he's like breathing kind of heavy. He's dissociated. It's like he can't quite hear what's going on. He feels kind of out of it. And I was in the theater like, holy shit. I was just like, that's it. Like, that's what's happening. I was like, this happens to Tony Stark too. Like,
Even superheroes deal with anxiety.
and I was just like, oh shit, like this is what this is. And I was like, okay, I gotta see a doctor. I gotta figure this out. And that's when I went, and he was like, yep, like this is it. So um it wasn't like a quick fix. I had to figure it out for a while, and it made going out and doing normal things really difficult, and it made me feel really weird at the time because I
Mhm.
didn't know anyone who struggled in that way. Like, maybe they did, but I just didn't know it. And so it felt like I felt so strange to be like, I feel dizzy, I feel off, I don't want to go out. And eventually it did get better, and I ended up going back to therapy after this happened to be like, okay, let's figure out what is at the root of this.
Mhm. Yeah, it's interesting to hear you talk about your experience with anxiety just because it's really different from mine. I think it's
Mhm.
a little bit less panic
Mhm.
involved and more like constant anxiety, but I feel like I didn't really know I was struggling with anxiety until way later on. Well, not necessarily later than you, but the first thing I ever really noticed was my depression. And that hit before I noticed my anxiety. And they often go hand in hand. At least that's what I've been told by health professionals. A lot of times it's like, you have depression, like you probably have anxiety too. But
Yeah.
I mean, don't take that as a professional opinion, but that is what I've experienced. But I just remember when I was a kid, I had like a a tough go of it. I would say when I was a kid, just like I really struggled to make friends. I really struggled to feel like I fit in. And so I wasn't happy a lot of the time. But I do remember specifically I was on the bus on the way to a piano lesson. They used to like drop us off at this like church where they did piano lessons. And I remember just feeling like there was literally a cloud over me all the time. Like things were just gray
Yeah.
constantly. And it's like kind of hard to pinpoint as a kid, like why do I feel like that? Like why am I
Mhm.
just
Down.
not happy, you know? And it wasn't, necessarily brought on by specific things. Like sometimes that did happen, but a lot of times it was just like constantly not happy. Um, and I remember I told my mom, and she took me to my pediatrician. The same pediatrician that if you listen to our Hot Girl Summer episode also started to make me question my weight at 10 years old. So she's not my favorite. But I who knows, it could have gone differently than how I remember it in my head, but what I remember in my head is her just, like, kinda telling me I was a teenager and, like, time
Yeah, like,
to
oh, it's hormones.
yeah, like, this kind of happens, and that was that, and then because we were in therapy a lot when we were little, but we stopped for a while, and then I remember I think it might have been my junior year of high school having, like, a mental breakdown in front of my mom, like, I have to go back to therapy. Like um I can't do this anymore kind of thing. Like I was just so miserable and it's like kind of hard to put into words like what that feeling is.
Mhm.
Um and even still I continue to deal with it. Like it's really hard to explain what that is like.
Yeah.
Um and yeah, I think it's, like, interesting because a lot of signs of depression in teens are like, I think hard to miss.
Right.
Like,
You spend a lot of time in bed.
I spent a lot of time in my bed,
Yeah.
um,
And
which a
it's
lot
like
of
we all
teens
like
do,
yeah, a lot of teens do love their room and their bed, which is
but
fair.
it was different. Like, I really did not wanna get out of my bed. I remember I used to have horrible back pain because of how much time I sat sitting in my bed.
Yeah.
Um, and there was a good amount of, like, emotional eating that I would do. I remember I would bring, like, a package of Oreos to my bed because that's where I
Mhm.
lived, and I would just eat them, like, continuously, and listen, I'm not against eating some Oreos when you wanna eat them, no
Right.
limits, but it was different. It was like there was nothing else for me to do. I
Mhm.
had no motivation to do anything else. Um And so I did go back to therapy, and that was really helpful. And I don't want to get like too, I don't want to be like trigger warning, but kind of trigger warning that it got pretty bad for me for a while there. I mean, I never had any like actual attempts of hurting myself, but a lot of thoughts about it. Like a lot of thoughts of, you know, truly the world would just be easier like without my presence. Like that's what it felt like all the time of like I'm not adding any value to this world. Like my presence isn't helpful to anyone else. It's not joyful to anyone else and that's just like a tough mental space as you can imagine. Like
Yeah.
it's just hard when you feel like you have no value. It's hard to bounce back from that. Um and, I've been in therapy for a long time. I went back in high school, and I did start going on medication for both my depression and my anxiety because I deal with that as well. And I have been on medication for 8 years, I think. Have been on different types throughout the years. I'm actually going through a shift in my medication currently. There was a period of time in college when I decided I don't think I need this anymore. And so I just went off of it. Note to all of you out there, don't do that. Don't just stop taking your medicine. It's a horrible feeling. I had a bad reaction when I just stopped taking my medicine cold turkey.
Yeah. I think
So
it's fairly common that people often they feel so much better on their medicine that they sometimes are like, "Oh, you know what? Like I could go without." But forgetting kind of like, all right, the medicine really does help you sort of get there, and that if you are going to go off, you got to do it sort of gradually.
definitely. I think there's a lot of stigma out there that being on antidepressants or any type of mental illness medication is a sign of weakness. And I put that pressure on myself a lot of the time. Right? Like I've been on these for years. Like, isn't it about time? Like, isn't it about time that I'm off of these? but I've been told by many professionals, like, if you're feeling good, that's not a sign to stop. That's a sign that things are working the way that they're supposed to be working.
Right.
And recently I've decided I want, things weren't working for me. This past year, especially, has been really tough for me, mental health wise, even more so than 2020, which I find like kind of funny. Like, I don't know, you would think 2020 would be worse, I guess. Like, there was more going on, but maybe it's because things didn't get better
Yeah, it's
like
kind of
we
it's
wanted them
just
to.
dragged on, and so now it's like the second phase of it.
Yeah. And it was kind of a scary feeling like you were talking about earlier, Rebecca. Like, you felt it again and you were like, "Oh no, like
Yeah.
it's back." And that's how I felt. Like, I hadn't felt this bad since I was a senior in high school. And
Mhm.
like having those thoughts of kind of worthlessness and hopelessness again. And which is a scary feeling. And I was scared when I felt that way. Luckily I have a lot of experience with this now, and I know that I can feel better. It's hard in the moment, but I know that there have been better times. It's kind of funny. I always used to laugh. Like, you would watch these like celebrity documentaries, right? And they would talk about their like team of doctors. And I was like, "What team? Like, what are you talking about? What is this, like, group?" Like, sounds like they follow you around, like, my team. And now I'm like, "Oh, I actually kinda get it." Like, I work with a lot of health professionals on
Yep.
my mental illnesses. I see a psychologist, a psychiatrist. I've started seeing a dietitian. I, talk about it with all of my doctors, with my primary care doctor, with my gynecologist, like, they're all aware.
Mhm.
And,
It's like you do need a team.
literally, you need a team to work on this brain.
Not
Um,
just yours, I mean, like, all of us, like, it
yes,
really takes a team, it takes a village.
and I do wanna acknowledge, like, I'm very privileged to be able to see all of these kinds of doctors to deal with my illness, because a lot of people cannot. So I'm really lucky that I get to do that, because it's probably been the most helpful thing. I mean, probably the most helpful thing has been my medication, because
Mhm.
when you're sick, you need medicine, right? That's how it works. So that's what's been most helpful for me. Um, but also, talk therapy has been the most helpful, in getting myself to a better place. And it's really interesting. Mental health sucks in a lot of ways, but in one of the ways that it sucks is that you can have a really good day and then the next day you can have a really bad day. And it's not
Yeah.
necessarily because of anything specific. It's just how it is. And, you know, um, yesterday I felt like I had a really good day. And on Monday, I had a panic attack for the first time in a really long time. And literally, like, my one of my former roommates used to call it burritoing, because I would do that sometimes when I would have a really bad day. I would literally get into my bed and wrap myself like a burrito. And I had like, no, sometimes it was just like for comfort, but on Monday it was like I was having a full on panic attack, and I actually was trying to like hide under my covers to not draw attention to my boyfriend about the fact that I was having a panic attack, which, newsflash to me, you can't do when you live in 600 square feet. It's very apparent. The hyperventilating is very apparent to everyone in your vicinity. So, um, but it's like those moments are really scary.
Yeah. That feeling of
And
just when something comes back and you're like, "Oh, no," like, this
mhm,
again is so demoralizing, and I think one of the things that has helped me with that is just, like, remembering that it has always passed.
mhm,
Like, whenever sometimes I wake up and I'm like, "Oof," like, I'm feeling some of that again, I'm feeling a little bit off, a little bit dizzy, or just a little bit stressed, or my heart feels like it's kind of racing a bit, and I just remind myself, I've gotten through it every time before and it's always passed, and I have these strategies now to like help deal with it. I'll do my sort of like slow intentional breathing to kind of like
right,
calm me down. I have just like a toolkit now. Most of that stuff is stuff that I learned in therapy, and even though it's still not fun, it's less panic inducing as it used to be, because now I know, okay, I have options. I have things I can do, and I know that this is going to stop at some point. It's not going to go on forever like I used to fear. I used to think that it would never end, and that just adds to the feelings of hopelessness.
Definitely. It's really helpful to be able to identify things when they're happening.
Mhm.
Even when I had my panic attack on Monday, I was like, okay, I'm having a panic attack. Like, what do we do when we have panic attacks, right? Like
Yep.
deep breathing. And it's hard because like when I get panic attacks, my whole body kind of clenches
Yep.
and it's really hard to relax, you know? So and then it just prolongs it. So I just have like different breathing strategies and things that I do to calm those down. But it's scary. It's even scary after dealing with it for our whole lives.
Yep.
But it is good to know that there are times it is good to know that you remember when it's better. Like now I remember
Mhm.
the bad times and I remember how they went away. And then the bad times kind of fade in your mind a little bit. Like those they
Yeah.
don't stay forever. Um it's like you don't forget about them, but they don't seem as strong in your mind anymore.
Yeah, they're not as
Um
powerful when you have, like, more tools and more memories of getting through it, sort of.
yeah. So that's just kind of like a snapshot into what our journeys have been with mental health. We wanted to also kind of talk about some of the things that we do in terms of coping. And once again, I'll just say that we are not experts in this area, but we have our personal experiences that we can speak to. And if you feel like you're dealing with any type of mental health issue, it's really important to speak to a professional. I know that that's a challenging, that can be really hard. I know I've had really hard experiences sometimes finding therapists or psychiatrists, but there are even now like quick apps that you can use. I get ads for BetterHelp like
Mhm.
constantly,
We are
which
not
is
sponsored, but if they wanna sponsor us, they can
if
let
they
us
want to.
know.
I hear about them all the time. But just different resources and apps like that where you can get kind of like immediate help, which can be really important. So, anywho, just a little plug. But some of the things that I try to do, I do a lot of deep breathing. Um, I've tried meditation and I have found it challenging, but what I have found incredibly helpful from those exercises is deep breathing. That's like the only thing sometimes that can really get me through something. And I actually normally practice deep breathing every night when I go to sleep because that's when my anxiety gets the worst. It'll feel like my whole stomach is clenching and I just have to breathe through it. And it actually helps with other things too. Like I recently got my ears pierced again. I got like my second piercings and I was really scared. Um, and I just like breathed through it. And that is something I don't think I would have ever been able to do, years ago. Like it just would have been panic through the whole thing. There would have been no breathing. It would have been me
Mhm.
holding my breath the whole time.
Especially you as a child, like, whenever there was, like, a shot coming your way, you would, like, scream bloody murder
Oh my
before
god,
the person even was
yes.
near you with the
Literally
thing.
a nurse's worst nightmare. That was me. And now I like donate blood and I get shots when I had to get them and I got my ears pierced. I also just got another tattoo. Like breathe through that. Like deep breathing can get you through a
It
lot
can
of
get you through
stuff.
so many things, like, that's honestly one of the best things for me when I'm feeling really anxious and I feel my breathing sort of like pick up, and then I get to this point of panic, like, oh my gosh, am I having an asthma attack? Am I having a panic attack? Who knows? And I just do like a slow, like 4 count in through my nose, hold it for 4, slow count out for 4, like out of my mouth. And it is so calming. And I just do that until I feel my heart rate slow. And then I'm like, okay, I can proceed and
Yep.
figure out the next thing to do. But I do it for anxiety. I do it for like physical pain, like you were
Hmm.
saying. I do it if I'm just like getting freaking worked up and I'm like getting irritated at something. It is so useful at like immediately sort of bringing you down a little bit.
Agreed. And I know one thing that we also both do is try to incorporate movement into our routines to help. with anxiety, and it's also helpful with depression. Sometimes it can be tricky for me. Sometimes movement for me can exacerbate my anxiety. Um, it's almost like my heart rate is up. So if I'm doing something like that's highly intensive, it just prolongs my heart rate being up.
Right.
I remember I used to be like, okay, you know what I'm going to do to deal with like this high anxiety I'm feeling? I'm going to get on the elliptical. It was not helpful. Just continued to have my heart rate up. So I try to be better about listening to my body. And if I'm panicking, I will either sometimes decide not to do a workout or I'll go for a walk.
Mhm.
Walks are so underrated, and walking is one of my favorite forms of exercise because it allows me to be like a little bit more mindful.
Yeah, it's time to think.
Mhm.
It's like there's not that much time during the day where you're just kinda, like, chilling with your thoughts.
Agree. Um And a lot of times too, I really love the area that I live. I'm close to the water, so I'll go for kind of a long walk in the morning sometimes. I'll get out there for like an hour, not, walking slow. Sometimes I'll get a coffee too. Like I'm not taking this like incredibly seriously. I'm not like power walking here. And I go down to the water and I just like it sounds so cheesy, but like I literally feel the wind on my face and I just try to like take a moment to be present and sometimes practice some gratitude of like how wonderful it is to be here. Um, One person we talk about a lot that we love is Whitney Simmons. She's a health and wellness influencer, and her phrasing is, "It's a beautiful day to be alive." And I actually find that really helpful. Sometimes I try to just remember, like, today is a
Mhm.
great day to be alive. Our grandpa used to say growing up, every day I'm vertical is a good day.
Yeah.
And I try to implement that as well.
Yeah, I feel like walks give you such nice perspective, especially if you're like out by some nature and you just see things and get outside of your head and your space, but at the same time just think through things. It's so peaceful and also just reminds you like, okay, there's other things going on besides whatever thing is kind of stressing me out today.
Totally. And then there are other moments where I like to go to boxing and like beat the shit out of a bag,
Yeah.
and that's helpful. Like it almost makes you feel kind of alive in those
Right.
moments.
Yeah, it's so true. Sometimes like really using your body in that way feels very satisfying and it's
Mhm.
like you're like forcing all of that anxious energy out of you into something else.
Yeah. Agreed.
One of the other things that I do sometimes is journaling. Sometimes I feel like I'll find myself typically late at night, like about ready to go to bed, and I have like a lot of thoughts all of a sudden
Love it
about
when that happens.
all of the things I've ever done wrong or all of the things I'm worried about
Every
or
social interaction you've ever had in your whole
every
life.
embarrassing moment in my entire life, or just like all of the things that could possibly ever go wrong, or just things I'm worried about. What would I do if someone I cared about died? Who
Oh
knows?
god,
Just
those are the worst ones. I do
those are
that a
the
lot at
worst.
night.
I'll just like it'll be like midnight, and all of a sudden I'm like, what would happen if this person died, or what if I died? And just it's
Like,
just
what if my cat dies? I
oh my
can't.
god, I can't. And we can't talk about pets. I'll literally burst into
No.
tears.
Nope, 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 nope. Moving on, moving on.
Nope, 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 nope. Um, but sometimes I find it helpful to just like start writing out all of the things that I'm anxious about to just get them out of my head and into something else. And sometimes seeing them in the list, I'm just like, all right, they're organized. I know what I'm worried about. Or sometimes I'll see them there and I'll just be like, that's an absurd thing to be worrying about. Why am I worrying about that? And once I see it out there, I'm like, okay, that's silly. I can go to bed. Why am I thinking about this? But it's helpful to sort of process your feelings, be like, okay, these are all the things that are on my mind. And then you can sort of slowly work through them and address them, or be like, I'm going to address them tomorrow. They're all listed here. They're not going anywhere. And I'll circle back to those.
I think that's such a great skill that you have. That's an area I'm really bad in. I keep every thought and feeling and emotion in my head. And
Like
I've been
it's locked
told,
in tight.
oh, it's locked in there. And I have been told by many health professionals to write it down. And I'm like, I don't want to see it on paper. They're like, it'll be helpful. And I'm like, I don't know about that. Don't want to write
I
it
really
down.
think it is. I feel like making lists just generally like helps me with my stress. If I'm like overwhelmed at work or overwhelmed with just like household tasks I need to do, as soon as I write them out, I'm like, all right, I have a
I
task list.
completely agree with that. Like, I write all of my work notes down in a notebook. When even in college, I wrote all my notes down. Like, if I have things to do, write it down. You wanna talk about my thoughts and feelings? I do not want it on paper. I don't want it out there. I don't want the memory of it. I don't.
I've
So,
also heard, I haven't done this personally, but I've heard from other people that sometimes when you're like really anxious or stressed or whatever, or just feeling emotional, to just write out all your thoughts, like the craziest ones you possibly have, like the most extreme things, and then you just write it out there and you just kind of crumple it up and throw it out. Like you
yeah,
don't
but
have to
then what if
hold
someone
on to
finds it? Like, it's where it's safe? In my head. Things that crazy
just
people
tear it
say.
up. Just tear it up first. It's fine. You can
So,
separate the pieces in different trash cans.
what I'm hearing is I need a paper shredder. And
You need tools.
yikes. Also, I can be so freaking annoying about, like, needing the right type of notebook and, like, the right
That
pens
is true. I've
for,
gotten
like,
like really
the
uppity
right
about my journal.
experience. It's so annoying. It's so stupid. But anywho, it's a goal that I always have, and I haven't gotten better at it, but the first step is acceptance.
Admitting you have a problem.
Right, thank you. The first step is admitting I have a problem, and then we work on the problem.
Yeah.
I talk about it with my therapist all the time. I love to avoid things, which I think sometimes can be helpful in some moments. And what we're currently working on is me sitting with my thoughts. So first I sit and then I write them down. But when I'm not sitting with my thoughts, I love to avoid them by watching reality TV. That is something
Yep.
that I find incredibly helpful. And that might sound so stupid, but like one of my favorites used to be the Kardashians. And I truly think it's because their voices were so monotone
Yeah, they have that like vocal fry / monotone thing going on.
that it was like very soothing. And their problems, I'm not trying to discount anyone's problems. I'm sure they have real life problems, but their problems on the show were so minute.
Mhm.
It was like Scott Disick and Chloe pulling or Kim pulling the Scott or the Todd Cranes prank. They would call Chris and be like, "Chris, it's me, Todd." Like those things, like just brought me so much joy. Now I've kind of switched to Real Housewives. I like that a lot. Sometimes though they're fighting so much that I'm like, this is having the
Right,
opposite
you're like,
effect.
this is just stressing me out now.
Like you're screaming. That's why the Beverly Hills ones are kind of nice because they don't scream as much. Anywho, I could go on about that forever, but that is something that I use a lot to help calm me down is just kind of tune out with something that feels very
Yeah,
relaxing.
it's nice to have like comfort shows. My go-to is probably Fixer Upper
Oh, another
with
good
Chup
one.
and Joanna. It's so satisfying and calming. Another one is Gilmore Girls. It's just
Mhm.
like so familiar and comforting that I'll just put it on. I'll be like, I'm in Stars Hollow. I'm
Or a
relaxed.
show that will make me laugh, like something that will almost like physically reverse the effects of what I'm feeling. Like I'll put on The
Yeah.
Office or Parks and Rec. Those are shows that will actually make me laugh out loud. And it's hard to make yourself laugh, but when you start laughing, like it really does help the other physical symptoms.
Yeah, yeah. It does like chemically lift your mood to have that burst.
I remember once I was given the tip of when you're running to start smiling because it'll make the run feel better. Because when
Mm.
you smile, it really, I don't know if it's endorphins that it releases, like, don't quote
Or
me on that.
yeah.
But it releases positive hormones that actually make you feel better. Now you look like a psycho when you're running and you're
With a
smiling,
smile on your face.
but who knows? Like maybe that's a tip I could just try to smile when I'm like having a panic attack. I don't know how feasible that sounds, but something to keep in mind.
Yeah, I think overall the biggest thing that has helped me is therapy, just working through things like having having someone make you feel like you're not crazy and give you actual tools to deal with what's making you feel anxious and to get to the root of it is just, I think, the most helpful thing. And like
I
we
also
said, we've gotten in and out of it.
Yeah, and I also think therapy can be so helpful too in managing your other relationships because then you don't use your friends, your family, your
Yep.
partner as a therapist.
Right.
Which I think we could honestly do a whole episode on that, but I had therapy on Tuesday, and I had been feeling really upset. As I had mentioned, I had a panic attack on Monday, and I felt so much better
Yep.
after that call, and not to say that that fixes everything, but, like, even that conversation was more valuable than conversations I had had, with other people because it's just, like it's just a trained professional, you know?
Right. They have training and expertise. And it's nice when you get to talk to someone and you feel like you're working through an issue and you don't feel so guilty about talking about yourself or putting your emotions on this person because like that is their job, that's what they're there for. You're not burdening them with anything, you're not emotionally exhausting them or just talking your friend's ear off or whatever. It's a person who's there to specifically hear about your issues and fears and concerns.
Right. So, anywho, World Mental Health Day is next week. It's on October 10th. It's a very important day. It's a national holiday in my book, not in anyone else's. But in my book, it's a national holiday. It's so important to celebrate it by doing something that's good for your mental health. I'll probably be watching reality TV. I'll probably do some deep breathing. Maybe I'll go for a walk. All of those things.
Yeah, hopefully this was helpful in any way. Again, we're not professionals, but these are just our experiences and what's worked for us. And if any of you have been dealing with these kinds of issues or have really great things that work for you that help you with your mental health issues, we would love to hear about that. So feel free to let us know at our Instagram at sisterlypod or via our email, which is sisterly.contact@gmail.com.
Or
It's just
maybe you've listened and you realized you're incredibly more well adjusted than we are. And if that's the case, let us know.
yeah.
We're happy for you.
Do share. I'm really happy for you. You look
Cheers
happy
to
and
you.
healthy.
But thanks so much for listening. It means the world to us. And we can't wait to catch you on the next episode of Sisterly.